We are just under a month away from Daredevil Born Again hitting Disney Plus, and I won't lie, I've not been all that hyped about the MCU in a while. When I get excited about Marvel characters, I tend to just go to Marvel Unlimited and read the comics nowadays, and I'm severely behind on both the films and the shows. The last film I watched, I think, was... You know what, I don't even know what it was, maybe Shang-Chi? And I got bored of Ms. Marvel halfway through because it was just yet another superhero origin story. But back before the MCU could start pumping out shows faster than writers could come up with interesting plots for them, they actually had an original slate of shows which technically began with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but after that was Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist. I guess they're kind of known as like the Netflix MCU shows nowadays, because that's where they originated, and I watched them as they came out, and I remember watching that first season of Daredevil and being like, holy shit, this is awesome. It was my first time being exposed to the character of Daredevil, and he's gone on to become one of my favourite Marvel superheroes ever since. Partially because of the show, and partially because I went and read the entirety of Volume 2 of the comics, which is like, I think it's like 110 comics or something, and it's just an incredible run. If you have Marvel Unlimited and you like Daredevil, that is my recommendation to you. Go and read those comics. It basically takes you through a 90s era, I believe, up to like the early 2000s. But we're not here to talk about that. When, about a month ago, they came out with a new trailer for Born Again, I started to take it seriously because, you know, I don't really keep up with, like, MCU news, so I wasn't aware that they had decided to include Foggy and Karen. All I'd heard were the initial plans to not include them. So I was like, oh right, okay, they're taking this seriously now. The trailer looks like a continuation of the Netflix show, and I was so worried that it wasn't going to be that. And don't get me wrong, we could still be disappointed, but I'm cautiously optimistic. But since I hadn't seen the show since it had first come out, I decided to go and do this rewatch. And we're not going to get super in detail here because, you know, I watched them over the course of a month. I'm talking about the series as a whole instead of each individual season. But the main takeaway I want to get to here is I rarely rewatch things because there are so many things left to get to watch for the first time. So often when I'm rewatching something, it can kind of feel like a waste of time. Well, not necessarily a waste of time, but just like a poor decision compared to watching something fresh and new. But I am so glad I decided to rewatch Daredevil because it's... It's fucking awesome. Especially now that I've read some of the comics, I'm able to kind of appreciate just how faithfully they adapted the character of Matt Murdock, minus the blonde hair. But the tone, they get the tone absolutely perfect in my opinion. It's hard for me to pick a favourite season. I can pick a least favourite, so we'll talk about that first. And in case you aren't already picking up on this, full spoilers ahead. My least favourite season is probably season 2. And I think that's just because it was a little bit too interested in setting up the Defenders to be its own thing. And I did watch the Defenders after season 2 as part of this rewatch, by the way, because there's some important story that's told within Daredevil's universe as part of that. But season 2, for anyone who needs a refresher, focuses on the return of Elektra, the full kind of introduction of the Hand as the villains, and it's when Daredevil's already been established as like a costumed vigilante superhero and stuff like that. Foggy knows who he is, Karen learns at the very end of the season. It also deals with the Punisher subplot. And honestly, I think the Punisher stuff was stronger than the Hand stuff. Just because a lot of the Hand stuff, like I said, apart from just setting up the Defenders, it felt a little bit hammy. I think the problem with the Hand in the Defenders verse is it feels like a threat which is a little bit beyond the bounds of reality within the storytelling of the characters within the Defenders, so Daredevil, Jessica Jones, etc. And nowhere can this be found more prominently than in the Defenders itself, where it's worse, where the show spends way too much time lingering on dialogue about how none of the main cast, especially Jessica Jones, can quite believe what's happening because it seems too mystical, it seems too crazy. Ninjas in New York? Okay, you guys are talking crazy. I'm out. You know, that kind of stuff. And while a little bit of that is important to establish that the characters are in over their heads, I think unfortunately it's almost like it felt like the writers weren't convinced that the suspension of disbelief would hold, and they kind of undermined themselves by overselling that the main cast were overwhelmed and out of their element. if you know what I mean. And that definitely started in season 2. I also thought that maybe they tried to take on too much in one season. It felt a bit Spider-Man free in that element of you've got too many different villains in one kind of story here. And especially how they tried to tie the Punisher subplot back into the end of a season where he's got nothing to do with Elektra and the Hand and the ninjas, but they want to tie off his storyline in regards to Daredevil and the morality of killing people, and they have the Punisher show up and shoot a ninja and nod at Daredevil and leave. And it's like, why did he do that? How did he know to be in that place at that time? That kind of thing. That being said, I'm definitely nitpicking here, and season 2 was still good viewing. It was still a 4 out of 5. But when compared to season 1 on the left side and season 3 on the right side, past a bit of a Defenders, it's hard to compare because, yes, we've had a lot of superhero origin stories, but Daredevil's season 1, firstly, it came before a lot of the MCU superhero origin stories, so it had that going for it. But because it's so down to earth and grounded in reality, it is more relatable? Is that the right way of talking about this? It's more believable. I think it helps that the character of Matt Murdock is just solid. This whole guy with a hero complex who's wrestling with the morality of hurting bad people, and he's got the Catholicism element going on as well. The level with which they explored that was excellent, and having Foggy find out and be really angry at his friend after like 3/4 of a season of just showing how loyal he is to Matt and how good of a friend he is to Matt, I think that was absolutely brilliant. I've argued with a friend over this about whether it's good to have a subplot in superhero stuff of the friends finding out and then being angry at the person for hiding the secret instead of, wow, I can't believe you're this superhero, that's so cool. And I agree that when it's done wrong it can be tiresome, but in Daredevil it is done extremely right. We see this again later with Karen Page. It's not just, oh my god, you're Daredevil, like, I understand why you kept this from me. It's, I understand why you kept this from me, and you've been lying to me this entire time, and it feels like a breach of trust. At the same time, though, when they finally come together at the end of season 3 and reform Nelson and Murdock and Paige, it's because that friendship remains an undercurrent. There are some scenes where Karen and Foggy are talking about Matt, and they're worried about him, and they're worried about losing their friend, and it's honestly, heartwarming isn't the right word. It's powerful how much you can see that they care about their friend and have these conflicting emotions about how they feel about what he does. You'll also notice that in season 1 and 3, Kingpin is the primary antagonist. That helps as well. He's so good in this series. It's probably the best depiction of Kingpin anywhere. Vincent D'Onofrio is something else, man. Sorry, I just looked that up to check. It's Vincent D'Onofrio. Don, as in he's the Don. Not really, there's an apostrophe in there. But the, I guess, rivalry, the antagonism, the conflict that builds between him and Matt Murdock over the course of these 3 seasons builds into something really great, and the finale we get in the final episode of season 3 is legitimately incredible, with Matt resolving to take Kingpin's life and then being stopped by Vanessa, and he's stopped by the human element of the fact that even this monster has someone who he loves and cares for deeply, and that even killing someone as monstrous as Wilson Fisk would deprive a wife of her loving husband, and the agreement they strike up at the end of basically Matt blackmails Wilson Fisk and says, if you go after Karen or Foggy, I will tell on Vanessa that she basically ordered to have this guy killed. And the way they shake on it, it's almost like this, after everything, like this gentleman's agreement, and it just works, and it's so fucking good. And I can't wait to see how it ties into Born Again. If they rewrite that, I'm gonna be so mad. Of course, I am interested in what's gonna happen in Born Again, because last time I saw Kingpin, he was being sent to prison with a mountain of evidence against him, and I don't see how he would ever get out. But of course, it's the MCU, or it's the Marvel Universe in general. No one stays locked up for long. No one stays dead for long in the comics. And so I am interested in just how he gets from here to there. I haven't watched Echo yet, and I do plan to watch Echo before Born Again. I'm also tempted to watch the 2 seasons of The Punisher as well, because I know he shows up in Born Again as well. What's interesting about that Born Again trailer, by the way, is that at one point Matt says he stopped being Daredevil because he crossed the line, and it cuts to the end of season 2, and it cuts to Punisher nodding at Daredevil, and there is a moment at the end of season 2 where Matt basically chucks someone off a roof, and I believe it's meant to be implied that he thinks he's killed them, but then Stick kills them afterwards. So I do wonder, like, does he know? Does he know that he didn't kill this man? Is that what he's referring to, or is he more referring to some plot point that's going to be revealed in Born Again in a time frame between then and now? You could also argue that he technically sent Dex after Wilson Fisk and used Dex to help get to Wilson Fisk, and Dex murdered people on the way to Wilson Fisk, so that could also be the line he's talking about crossing. By the way, at the end of season 3, I don't know if you remember this, but it does end on basically Bullseye being created by, like, this doing surgical stuff to his spine, and you can see something activate in his eyes or whatever. He already seemed pretty fully powered during season 3, to the point where I thought, does he have some element of super strength? Because you should, no matter how good your aim is, you shouldn't be able to impale people with blunt objects just by throwing really hard. But yeah, I wonder if we'll see Dex make a comeback as Bullseye in Born Again. I'm kind of like, knowing some of the stuff Bullseye does in the comics, I'm like, no, Matt suffered enough, man, leave him be. But yeah, I haven't gotten into too many intricate details about the different little subplot elements of all the different seasons, so I hope you'll forgive me for that. But just to throw out a few things before I end up my thoughts here, I really loved the mother subplot during season 3 with Matt and his mother, and finding out about her backstory and how Matt felt about that. As part of this rewatch, I'm glad I rewatched it, because there are so many, like, major elements to this story that I forgot. And, you know, they kind of came to me as the episodes, you know, developed the plot, and I saw things coming from, like, an episode or two away. But, like, I forgot about Karen's backstory with her brother and stuff like that. I'll be honest, I forgot Karen became a reporter. That's a level of, like, you know, I needed to rewatch this show before Born Again that we're talking about. I also realized Matt Murdock looks cooler as Daredevil without the suit. He looks cooler when he's just wearing a blindfold or a mask or whatever you want to call it, like that top headscarf. I don't think I actually like the Daredevil suit, especially not the first iteration of it. The first iteration is kind of subtle if you're not looking out for it, but the first iteration has a helmet where he kind of has these weird pads around the ears, and it kind of, the leather comes up around his cheeks a little bit too much, and then at the start of season 2, when he gets shot in the head, cracks his helmet and has to get a new one made, they fix those goofy looking elements, but it still looks a little goofy. Jessica Jones kept making fun of his outfit in The Defenders, and I kind of agreed with her every time, and I also think Matt might have agreed, and that's the secret reason why he said, I've outgrown what it stood for, and then never put it on again. But we know he's putting it on again in Born Again, so I haven't had a good look at that suit yet. Hopefully it's better. I might need to go rewatch the trailer. So yeah, I'm really glad I rewatched it. I'm off to go watch a kind of compilation of Daredevil appearances between his show and now, and Kingpin appearances between his show and now, and then I'm gonna go watch Echo, where the first episode is billed as her killing him, which I don't think that's gonna stick. But thanks for the blurb anyway, Disney+. So let me know what you thought about Daredevil if you like, and I will catch you in whatever I make next.